I was only 14 years old when it happened, the night that changed everything. It was a stormy Saturday in Florida, the kind where thunder rumbles so loud it shakes the house. My brothers and I were playing video games to pass the time while our parents were out, and the power went out unexpectedly. What seemed like a simple power failure quickly turned into something far more sinister when we heard strange sounds from the woods, followed by a shadow in the darkness that wasn't supposed to be there. And that was just the beginning. It was supposed to be just another rainy Saturday night. My brothers and I sat in the living room, huddled around the TV, playing some weird PS2 game where WWE wrestlers drove cars and shot at each other. I don't even remember the name of the game, but I remember laughing, the sound of the rain pounding on the roof, and the occasional flash of lightning lighting up the dark sky outside. My parents had gone out to some upscale event, leaving me in charge of my younger brothers. My sister was off at a friend's house, so it was just us. The storm had been going all day, so when the power went out around 8 o'clock, it didn't seem that unusual. We all groaned in disappointment, but it didn't last long. We assumed it was a blown fuse from the storm. I wasn't worried. I went to grab some candles, figuring we'd ride out the blackout with a few more rounds of the game. That's when we heard the weird pop. It wasn't the power shutting off. It sounded like something from outside. We looked at each other, confused but not too alarmed. We just thought it was the storm again. But then the house grew eerily silent. No rain hitting the windows, no wind howling, just a quiet, unnatural stillness that I couldn't shake. I remember the feeling of unease creeping in as we sat there in the dark. It was too quiet. My dad's voice broke the silence when he told me to grab a flashlight. He was already getting his rain jacket on to go outside and check the fuse box. We had 2 fuse boxes, one inside, one outside on the telephone pole in the yard. My dad asked me to come with him to the outdoor fuse box, and I reluctantly agreed. The rain was still coming down hard, and the wind whipped at my face as I held the flashlight. We stood in the yard, the only sound being the rain and the occasional clap of thunder. My dad fiddled with the switches in the fuse box, flipping each one, trying to reset the power, but nothing happened. He told me to stay there and keep flicking the switches while he went inside to check the indoor fuse box. I stood in the yard, shivering from the cold and the eerie feeling of being out in the storm. It was hard to concentrate with the rain pounding down, but I tried to stay focused on the task at hand. That's when I heard it, the crack, a loud, sharp sound coming from the woods behind the house. Something big, something heavy. I aimed the flashlight in that direction. For a split second, I thought I saw an arm reach around the tree, and then it vanished. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. A flash of something moving behind the tree, a shadow that didn't belong. For half a second, I thought it was just the wind, or my imagination playing tricks on me in the dark. But when I aimed the flashlight again, it was gone. I stood frozen, the flashlight shaking in my hand, feeling a cold sweat run down my back. Something wasn't right. I had a gut feeling that what I saw wasn't just an animal or a trick of the light. My mind raced as I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just a branch moving, or the wind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I called out to my dad, but there was no answer. My voice felt too small against the storm, swallowed by the pounding rain. I looked back toward the woods, my eyes scanning for any movement, but it was dark, too dark. The feeling of being watched crept over me like a heavy blanket. I turned and rushed back toward the front door, but when I reached it, I hesitated. Something felt off. As I stood there, I thought I saw something again, a glimpse of an arm, pale and wet, reaching out from behind the tree just for a moment. I slammed the door shut behind me, my heart racing. What was that? And who or what was hiding in the woods? I rushed inside and found my dad in the hallway, fiddling with the switches of the indoor fuse box. I told him about what I saw, about the arm reaching out from behind the tree, but he didn't seem to take it seriously. He listened, nodded, then told me to stay inside while he went out to look around. He grabbed the flashlight, his face serious, and stepped out the door. I stood by the window, watching him walk into the rain-soaked yard. The wind howled through the trees, and the whole world felt unnaturally quiet. quiet, except for the sound of the storm and my own racing heart. I tried to calm myself, but it was impossible. The unease grew heavier with every passing minute. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and wet. Not from my dad, though. These footsteps came from a different direction, closer, dragging across the wet ground. My heart pounded. I peered through the curtains, trying to make out who it was, but there was no one in sight. Just the sound of footsteps growing nearer. I called out for my dad, my voice shaking. "Dad!" I shouted again. Then, through the mist and rain, I heard a voice, my dad's voice, but it wasn't from the direction I had been looking. It came from the other side of the house. Panic surged in my chest as I realized something was terribly wrong. I sprinted toward the back of the house, my heart hammering in my chest. The footsteps were still echoing in the darkness, but now they were joined by my dad's voice calling out from the woods. "I'm over here," he shouted, but it sounded distant, muffled by the pounding rain. I rushed toward the sound, feeling the cold mud splashing up around my feet. Every step felt like it took me deeper into the unknown. The panic in my chest grew with each breath I took. I couldn't see anything in the dark. Just the storm, the trees, and the occasional flash of lightning lighting up the night sky. Finally, I saw him, my dad, coming back toward the house, looking confused and out of breath. Relief flooded through me, but something didn't sit right. He had been in the woods for too long, and why hadn't he heard the footsteps? "What happened?" I asked, breathless. "There was no one out there," he replied, his face pale. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the yard nervously. But I saw someone running into the woods. Before I could ask more, we heard a loud knock at the front door. The door handle turned slowly, as if someone was trying to get in. My mom stopped me before I could approach it, her face ashen with fear. She looked through the peephole and then screamed. My mom's scream sent a wave of panic through me. I froze, unable to move, as she yanked me away from the door. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Don't open it," she whispered urgently. I could hear faint scraping sounds from the other side of the door, footsteps, slow and deliberate. I pressed my ear against the wood, trying to hear better. The sound of someone breathing heavily just outside the door sent chills down my spine. "Who is it?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My mom didn't answer. She was staring through the peephole, her face twisted in fear, and I could see the horror in her eyes. She ushered us all away from the door and told us to go upstairs. The silence in the house felt suffocating. We could hear the footsteps on the porch, as if someone was walking around peering through the windows. Then, the door handle rattled, as though someone was trying to force their way inside. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but I stayed frozen, watching my mother as she looked helplessly at my father. "It's not him," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The back door suddenly creaked open, and we all rushed to the back of the house, where my dad had come back inside. The next morning, the tension was still thick in the air. We had barely slept, too afraid to move, too terrified to even speak. The night's events played over and over in my mind. Strange footsteps, the voice of my dad coming from a different direction, the figure at the door. Everything felt wrong. As soon as the sun rose, we cautiously made our way downstairs, my mom keeping a tight grip on my hand. My dad was already examining the front door, his face grim. The lock had been tampered with, and there were deep scratches along the frame. Whoever had tried to get inside had been relentless, but it wasn't just the door. My heart sank when we reached the basement. The window was smashed, shattered glass glittering on the floor. The muddy footprints from last night were still there, leading inside. My dad moved through the basement slowly, his footsteps heavy. On the counter sat the cash we'd kept in the basement bar, gone. Some antique decorations that my mom treasured were missing too. It was clear someone had been here. But the worst part? The footprints went up the stairs, right up to the basement door. They stopped there. The lock had kept the intruder out, but for how long? We had been lucky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Thank you for joining us on this haunting journey through the storm and the terror that came with it. If you were in my shoes, what would you do when faced with an unseen threat, a stranger at the door, and footsteps that weren't your own? Could you survive the night, or would you be too afraid to face the darkness? Share your thoughts below. And if this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dare to Listen, because sometimes the real danger is lurking just outside the door.